Morning. I'm going to talk to you about 100 gig, but I want to take you outside your comfort zones. I know. I want to take you outside of the data center because the world exists outside of the data center. No? Not convinced? It's snowing. This is just a little bit of snow. We have much worse in the UK, okay? We wouldn't be in the office if it was like this. 100 gig. What we're trying to achieve here is a 100 gig connection from your data center, from your POP to your customer site. Now, your customer site could be an enterprise customer, or it could be a remote data center where you're trying to get 100 gig. But you want to make it really simple, really cost effective, and really easy to install. That's the aim, that's the goal, that's what they're trying to achieve here. So because I'm in a marketing role, I have to show you the slide of data going like that, but you guys know that already, right? The technology development from 1 gig to 10 gig to 40 gig to 100 gig, although we're not seeing much in terms of 40 gig in the WAN. We're seeing 40 gig in the data center, but not necessarily 40 gig in the WAN. So it's going from 1 gig to 10 gig to 100 gig. And this development, this technology development, follows a similar pattern. And we're going to argue today that we're in the third phase of this technical development from a 100 gig perspective. So when you're looking at the next few slides, think of 100 gig. And it's following the same pattern, a similar pattern to what happened in 1 gig to 10 gig to 100 gig. I was having dinner last night with some of the guys, very nice restaurant in Copenhagen, by the way, excellent food. And we talked, I'd lost my train of thought then. So we're talking about 100 gig. What happened when it first phase came along of 100 gig? It was large, it was expensive, it was very large, and it was power hungry. But that was okay because it was developed for long haul applications. The 100 gig applications when they first came out were developed for 800 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers plus. So the next phase, phase 2, came along where they were less expensive, they were slightly reduced size, and they were less power hungry. There we go. And that was great for the metro application, sort of 600 kilometers. So phase 2 of 100 gig. We're now entering phase 3 of 100 gig. And there is a de facto standard evolving at 100 gig, which is lower cost, smaller size, and lower power. And in that space, you only need to address, we're talking about addressing the space here of up to 40 kilometers-ish. Okay, 40 kilometers. You never know what's going on behind you guys, just be very careful. Could have been anything going on there. So we're bridging the gap here. If you're trying to bridge the gap to move to 100 gig, we're talking in the WAN space here. We're not talking in data centers, remember. We're talking about reaching your customer clients, your customer sites. Most people will add a first 10 gig, then they'll add a second 10 gig, then they'll add a third 10 gig, then they'll add a 10 gig. But what happens if you want to offer them 20 gig? What happens if they burst in? Because a lot of the traffic today is bursty traffic. There's a lot more bursty traffic out there, which is only spiking for a while. So why not, if you deliver a 100 gig payload, but limit it to, say, 40, 50 gig, and allow them to burst beyond that and charge them an extortionate rate for the privilege, by the way, by putting some sort of Ethernet router behind it. I don't care if it's Cisco, Juniper, or anybody else's, Aristas. Deliver a 100 gig payload, but maybe just rate reduce them. Very, very cost-effective way of doing it. So the new technologies, when they first came out, it was 1 RU high, one rack unit, multiple rack units in height. It was, when CFPs came out, it was 1 RU and 2 RU products were developed. So we're now at the phase where you need a really small device, really simple device to deliver it in this third phase, because that's what happened at 10 gig, right? That's what happened at 1 gig. It's beginning to happen at 100 gig. Looking at the transceiver side of things. First, you had CFP. Remember back in 2010? I know some of you in the room won't remember 2010, but it did exist. You had CFP and CFP2s. These were very power-hungry, very large, pluggable optics. They had FEC on them. They were very clever bits of kit. We've seen CFP, we've seen CPAC. CPAC is Cisco's proprietary form factor. It's an LR4, but it's a Cisco CPAC form factor. CFP4 never really happened. And the de facto standard is QSFP28. I was told you could get 32 QSFP28s on a blade now. Back in the day, back in 2010, if anyone remembers that far back, you could get one CFP on a blade. So it's much reduced in terms of power consumption, it's much reduced in terms of size, but it's also reduced in terms of functionality. You don't have things like FEC on a QSFP28. Do you need FEC on a QSFP28? I would argue no. If you need it, if you want to reach 40-odd kilometers, no. If you want to reach 100 kilometers, if you want to reach 1,000 kilometers, yeah, you probably need you probably need FEC. But we're talking about the 40-kilometer reach where most of your customers' locations are. But because we want to make things complicated, we can't just have one type of QSFP28. Oh, no. No, 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 no. We have to have multiple types of QSFP28. So there's a QSFP28 SR4, LR4, ER4 Lite. There's a QSFP28 PSM4 coming out. But without doubt, the de facto standard is QSFP28 LR4. Most people will deploy a QSFP28 LR4. And in theory, with a following wind and everything being absolutely first class, you will reach 10 kilometers. The reality is an LR4 optic will reach maybe 8 kilometers. But you can reach distances of up to 40 kilometers, and everyone says, well, how do you do that then, Steve? Okay, maybe they don't. So to get to 100 gig, just let's understand what QSFP28 transceivers actually are. QSFP28 transceivers are actually 4 lanes of 25 gig, which goes from the 1295, I can remember this bit, 1295 to 1309 nanometers. It's actually 4 times 25 gig in an LR4 optic. If we talk about amplification, if anyone's had any dealings with optical networks and you talk about amplification, everyone automatically assumes that it's amplification in the C band. Most EDFAs, ADVAs, as they're referred to, if you talk about amplification, people will automatically think C-band amplification. And that's great. That's around the 15 nanometer range. And that's great if you want to do long-haul stuff. That's where your DWDM lambdas sit. But as an industry, we've seemed to have forgotten that you can still amplify in the O-band around the wideband 1310 nanometer range. We just, as an industry, just forgot it. Now, there's reasons why you do the DWDM, i.e. you can reach, because you can reach further distances. Amplification in the O-band is limited in terms of reach because of the noise, signal-to-noise ratios. But you can still amplify in the O-band using SOAs, semiconductor optical amplifiers. So why can't you reach extend that LR4 optic using a SOA amplifier to 40 kilometers? It works. It's agnostic to the vendor of the QSFP28 LR4 supplier, and there are lots of different. What we're discovering is that there are QSFP28 LR4 optics and there are QSFP28 LR4 optics. Price should not be your primary driver on these things, gentlemen and ladies. But your receive signal, any receive signal has to be, it depends on the transceiver manufacturer, but it has to be around 10 dB, neg 10 B on the receive leg. Anything worse than that, the transceiver will not function. So you can sit a simple amplifier on there to extend that to 40 kilometers using standard QSFP28 transceivers. Make sense? We also are aware of new standards coming out, such as PAM4. So PAM4, if you think of transmit receiver as a light on, light off, PAM4 is 2 lights on and 2 lights off over the same lane. Okay? It's PAM4 is amplification. It's actually a modulation techniques, but there are PAM4 transceivers being promoted. And it's like 2 lanes on, 2 lanes off, which just really overcomplicates things. The downside of that is that not many switches will support them till routers, switches will support them today. They're very power hungry, very power hungry. They've got a negative power budget, so amplification will always be required. You will also need dispersion compensation. Now, you don't want to get into the dispersion compensation side of the world, because then you need very clever people like we have back at HQ who can get into dispersion compensation. I'm not one of those very clever people. And you may even need different muxes, so any standard muxes you've got out there at the moment may not be applicable. So PAM4 sounds great, but there's still a lot of technical hurdles to overcome yet. So we're getting into phase 3 of this. So QSFP28 is becoming the de facto form factor. Depends upon which QSFP28 you use. There's a QSFP28 PSM4, which is 500 meters, but that's going to be like a few $100s, whereas a QSFP28 LR4 is, I've had different figures quoted to me, anything from like 1,500 to 2,500. But then it reaches further. So if enterprise customers are now looking to move beyond 10 gig, they want bursty traffic. They want to support 40 gig, 50 gig, 60 gig, 80 gig, 100 gig. You don't need very expensive transponders. You don't need very expensive CFP, CFP2 transceivers to deliver that. Why can you not just deliver it? Why can you not just deliver it over a QSFP-based architecture? You can do it now to 40 kilometers by amplification, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper than a CFP and transponder-based solution. So we're seeing a growing need for financial services, because financial services space, we're talking to one customer, more than talking to one customer, who have financial services as their clients, and they want low latency. Microseconds, milliseconds count. They don't want to go to an Ethernet level. They don't want to go up the OSI stack. They want to keep everything optical to optical, because if you keep optical to optical, it's lower latency. Broadcasters, we're all streaming. Some people stream some things, Christian, and some people stream sports channels. But more and more stuff is going streaming. Maybe as a wholesale point to other service providers. Maybe as that link to that remote data center where you just need that 100 gig. We're seeing a growing demand for 100 gig, low-cost 100 gig applications within 40 kilometers of the carrier pop. And why not do it on a QSFP28-based transceiver-based platform? Because that's going to be far more cost-effective than a CFP, CFP2 transponder-based solution. And the one product slide is this little box. And we have a drawing outside which shows the actual size, which is yay big. It's like a little modem. So it's QSFP in, QSFP out. Support any form factor, CWDM4, LR4. Pardon me. It's self-installing. There's nothing to install. You don't need to send an expensive engineer to site to install this. Why not just pre-configure it with an IP address, and all the guy on site has to do is plug in the transceivers, plug in the fiber cables, et voila, you have a 100 gig service up and running. You don't need to send an expensive guy to site, because that costs money. That's expensive. It's got web GUI. There's a management interface. We will be doing Yang and stuff like that on the roadmap, but that's not there today. You can do port loopback. It's optical to optical. Low latency, low cost, delivering 100 gig to your corporate clients. It makes sense to me, but hey, I'm just a sales guy. We've got a small table out there, and love to take any questions. I know I said 45 minutes, but I haven't got 45 minutes worth. I thought we'd catch up and have beer earlier. Any questions? Thanks, everyone.